Greetings, salutations, and welcome to another review of another book in the Bobiverse. I have just finished All These Worlds by Dennis E. Taylor. Reflection is annoying. There we go. What a great cover. That is just pure sci-fi, it really is. So, there was a lot to enjoy in this book, and I enjoyed every bit of it. I went straight on to this one after finishing number 2 for We Are Many. It worked quite well with this book. I definitely do need a break before I continue on to the next one. I often feel when I read a whole series continuously that I start to find myself dissatisfied with elements of the book that I don't think would bother me as much if I wasn't reading them kind of like eating Pringles chips without ever stopping. So, All These Worlds. I was told by a couple of people who had read it that it was a bit different to the previous two, and it was. Even if only in that there was a lot more conflict in this one. The first two are very geeky. The very first one concentrated on one character, Bob, as he becomes a brain in a box and then goes on to be a space shuttle. Sorry, a spaceship. And then in the second one you've got multiple Bobs expanding everywhere, but it's still very low-key. It's not totally lacking in conflict, but this one definitely had more conflict. There was even combativeness. Though Bob himself is not described as a character who is combative or argumentative, even in D&D apparently his characters were more magic users than fighters, but nevertheless in the world is combativeness, and this book reflects it in several different ways. So the original Bob is has an android and is down on the planet with Archimedes' people. And there's conflict between the two tribes or the two villages there. In Marcus's world, Poseidon, the ocean planet, there's political unrest leading to a battle basically between the established regime, who are totalitarian, and a whole heap of rebels who want a more independent, more democratic style world. You've got Howard's life, where his girlfriend's children don't want her to become a replicant, and of course the overarching story throughout this book is the others. The separate species of alien who have a sort of insectoid feel to them, who eradicate planets and all life on them. So many of these themes I really loved. And I was especially enthusiastic about the discovery of the other ships and how two of the Bobs take them over and bring them to Earth. I loved the battle for Earth. I really enjoyed that final battle and the give and take and the different perspectives and all the things that were happening. I thought it was great. I was less enthusiastic about the theme of Howard's replicant love for Bridget and marriage, or whatever you're calling it. It's not that I hated Bridget, I just didn't much care. And even so, at the end, it becomes a marriage with kids, apparently. It's like, why? Why bother? Why? In terms of the Howard-Bridget conundrum, I suppose I'll mention it. Howard is one of the earlier replicants, and he's one of the ones who's got an android that he can get into, and in the body he can go down to a planet and interact. So early on in the colonization of a couple of systems, he had a friend whose name is French and whose name I can't pronounce, and he introduced him and this other friend of his who's female, Bridget, together, and they got together and had kids. He was heartbroken because he was in love with Bridget, as I'm sure we all understood. Eventually her husband dies, and now there are androids, so Howard can go down and meet her and interact with her, which is all fine to an extent, except one of her kids is kind of batshit about it and makes issues. Howard's whole motivation is to convince Bridget to become a replicant, because in all the years that Bob has been making more replicants, other individuals are incredibly reluctant to try this. In fact, they don't have anyone who's volunteered. There's one of the early model replicants who got sent out. He's an Australian, whose name I've forgotten. But other than that, they're all Bobs. So convincing Bridget to become a replicant is a big deal. And the way Howard does this, he takes her to a planet called Odin. It's got this wild biosphere, because we're told she's a biologist. This wild biosphere in which you've got just imagine the ocean with manta rays and plankton and jellyfish and real fish and squid. Only in Odin, there's a density to the atmosphere, and all of this happens in the air. So you've got very fertile air. It's a concept that I've seen in other science fiction books, and I've always enjoyed it. I would have been far more interested to learn more about that ecosystem on Odin, which was what convinced Bridget to become a replicant in the first place, rather than her and Howard getting together in married android bliss or whatever. In fact, the only serious criticism that by book 3 I could find about this series is there's a lack of bioscience. It's all astronomy and engineering. It's a strong STEM science. I really like it. There's mathematics, there's modelling. It's great. But I'm essentially all about the bioscience, and there really isn't that much of it. However, what there is geek. There is so much geek. I am in awe of the level of geek that this manages to achieve. And in this book, I officially gave up trying to get the geek on my own, and I started Googling for references. Basically, I was expanding my geek umwelt, you could say. For example, Nantucket, Sterling. Who got that? Really? Apparently there were books. I didn't know anything about them. They sound awesome. I might read them if I find them. But yeah, so much geek I did not get. So much geek. Dennis E. Taylor, Master of Geek. I was really happy with Bob's story. The end of his sojourn on Delta Eridani. That was Archimedes' world. First contact was with these bat-like mammal individuals that are right on the verge of intelligence, and Bob becomes deeply involved. He follows Archimedes, who's like the genius of his world, from his childhood through his adulthood, and finally when the androids are perfected, Bob and Archimedes have been friends for like 70 years, and Bob's gone down in an android to live on that planet because the Borb, the sphere, the alien, has been asked by council to butt out of their business, which is fair. But Bob was involved on an emotional level, so he goes down, becomes involved in Archimedes' village and their life. I really like the ending of this story arc. So Archimedes becomes an old man and dies, and then that story arc is ended. Though Bob, of course, isn't. Bob goes on to the next phase, and Bob is saying that having become involved with Archimedes on Delta Eridani for so long, he now wants to become the exploring Bob that he was originally meant to be, going out to the star system. I thought that was beautifully done. So I liked that. Again, I overall really enjoyed this book. At the end, you've got the showdown between the others and the Bobs, which is humanity, as they're trying to evacuate the Earth and defeat the others' Starfleet, and all this great stuff. Really loved it. I would say, probably because I went straight onto this from the second one, I was quibbling a little bit more than I otherwise would. This is still a 5 out of 5 star book, don't get me wrong, but I noticed things that bothered me. Not only the lack of bioscience, the treatment of some of the stories seemed a little bit glancing, superficial. So, for example, there's one Bob called Marcus, and he's on a world called Poseidon. When Poseidon was first discovered and put forth for colonization, I was wildly excited. It's an ocean planet, marine biology. And they first of all started off on mats, and then they had floating cities in the sky. They had a whole heap of different stuff. But really, that world seemed to be treated a bit superficially for me. I would have liked to see more. I wanted to see those giant krakens. I wanted to see those massive hydras. I wanted more of the ocean. And we didn't get much of it. What we got was it was colonized by a governing council who failed to arrange the elections that were promised as part of their charter. They became a totalitarian regime. Then Marcus, in an android body, got together with a whole heap of rebels, and they rebelled against the totalitarian regime and liberated the people of Poseidon. It was a good story. It was enough of a good story that it could have been one whole book. So small chapters seemed a bit glancing. I could definitely have read a whole book on it, let alone the Battle for Earth. That could definitely have been a whole book on their own. Okay, that's not what Taylor is doing here. I get it. What he is doing here is amazing. I really love it. I've got no argument at all with the Bobiverse. I thoroughly love it. I thoroughly enjoy it. I thoroughly recommend it to all sci-fi lovers, all geeks and nerds. It's just so much fun. It's enjoyable to read. It's easy to read. It's so much fun. I do, however, feel that I very much need a break. So this is number 3. I have finished it. I am now going to take a break. I'm going to walk away. I'm going to read some more classic sci-fi that goes more into depth in the actual themes. Maybe something, a battle. Maybe something that has got this space battle that I didn't quite come to grips with totally in this book. And then I will go on to number 4. So thank you for watching this short video. I anticipate a much longer video on the Bobiverse when I've finished all 4 as a set. In the meantime, thank you very much for watching. Like, comment, subscribe, all that sort of stuff, and always read good books.